Now here, because the last scene of Act 4 concludes really, really fast, and there's not much time for reflection, so I just want to sum up some of my last thoughts about the end of the events in Act 4. The Doctor here doesn't really have any right to be angry, because he knew marrying Lulu was a bad idea. He said so to his son, that it would be suicide. The decision he made could easily be argued to be basically equivalent of when any one of us decides to do something that we know is stupid and it's going to be a disaster, and yet we expect it to work out somehow. So in one sense, he doesn't really have any right to be angry. He got what he probably deep down knew would happen. The other reason I think he doesn't have any justification for his anger is because his own so-called morality is based on personal preferences. It's not any kind of real morality, meaning that so long as Lulu is the one that's suffering or she's the one getting screwed, he's happy. But because it's him that has to suffer is the only reason why now all of a sudden these events are wrong or seems wrong to him, and now he wants to make her pay because he's been outsmarted, maybe not just once but twice. But Dr. Schoen definitely reminds me of the verse in the Bible, Job 40 verse 8, in which God says to his accusers, "Will you condemn me to justify yourself?" That's basically what Dr. Schoen is doing here, and that's basically what relative morality is. It's not morality at all. It's really a kind of pseudo-morality based on an illusion of self-righteousness, where so-called morality is determined by what's right for him. The Doctor was trying to, in one sense, we'll say, clean up his mess that he made from his bad choice by trying to force Lulu to kill herself. And I think this is completely based purely on his ego and his narcissism, because instead of just getting a divorce like a normal person would, which involves him having to admit he made a mistake, instead he tries to force Lulu to kill herself so he can save his reputation and save himself from people gossiping and talking about him, and maybe to save himself the financial cost of a divorce. In the courtroom scene, and I'm not complaining about this in any way, but when they show the close-ups of Lulu or Louise Brooks's face, because she was so beautiful, it really is hard to focus on anything else. And this is perfect casting again. It's a good, wise choice of Pabst to have her play this character, because again, Louise Brooks was so beautiful that people would do anything for her. Again, it's even here in this serious scene where she's being basically charged with manslaughter. She can't turn it off, so she's basically his Lulu wherever she goes. Now, in the courtroom scene with the prosecutor, when he refers to Lulu, now my German isn't very good, so I might have read this wrong, but with the few words that I can understand, it seems to me as he refers to her as Pandora. Now this means either that her real first name is Pandora and she's called Lulu, but I think what it actually is that her last name is Pandora, so her legal name is Lulu Pandora. And therefore that's why the playwright titled the play as Pandora's Box, which almost sounds like a name for a porno movie. The other thing in here that now I can finally mention, I've been wanting to talk about this for the last several parts of this commentary, but because of spoilers and I couldn't give away certain key parts of the plot, so I couldn't really mention this or talk about it much in detail. But now here I can, because things are starting to unfold and there's not as many surprises, we'll say it. But anyway, this shows that from here, especially from here on, it shows the genius of Pabst's choice of wanting only Louise Brooks to play Lulu, because her style of acting is based on mostly reacting to the other actors. And the genius of Pabst using this is that instead of how Lulu is traditionally played, where she's the active one that causes all the circumstances, and that was why he didn't want Marlene Dietrich to play her, because Marlene Dietrich, even though she's only 4 years older than Louise Brooks, was going to play Lulu as if she was an old whore, and the one in control of every situation, manipulating everything for her benefit. And the other thing I would point out is this says a couple interesting things about Lulu's character, and that is that if Lulu is supposed to be approximately 21, which was Louise Brooks' actual age on the filming of this movie, If she's a worn-out old whore by 21, that sure tells you something about her character, how early that the little pimp was probably pimping her, probably from 11 or 12 years old. Anyway, this also suggests to me that Lulu would have been a beautiful young street kid when the little pimp found her. And I know from experience from watching kids growing up on the streets that you learn how to do what you have to do to survive. So, in one sense, I don't really think we can fault Lulu for a lot of the things she does in this film, because she's just doing what life has taught her to do to survive. But anyway, the fact that Louise Brooks just chooses to react to the other actors basically now creates the impression that instead of having Lulu as the mastermind, the evil mastermind, which is how the play and the other film characterized her, it's more like she's, except for a couple instances where she directly causes the circumstances, and this is one of them. It's more like in most of the film now, she's being dragged along by bad circumstances, just like all of the other characters are. And this, again, is I think where Pabs shows his real genius, because this one change makes this story way more interesting and a much, much better film than the previous film version and the play that this film is based on. The other thing I would say is that Louise Brooks here is really, in this film, Pabs was lucky to find her, that she's someone that had her style of acting and her beauty was available to do this film, because again, without her playing this role, I don't think this film would have been as good. And Louise Brooks herself was. Now in this scene here, the Countess sure shows that she has a hot little temper. I guess the old saying that you don't get between a dog and its meat would apply here, when she gets up all in the prosecutor's grill and threatens him. I think in her relationship with Lulu, she is, if not is the dominant one, she's trying to be the dominant one. And Louise Brooks herself was a very incredible talent. You don't get people of any profession, whether they're actors or models or actresses or musicians or whatever, you don't get very many of ones like her, where I'll use the example of in her previous job as a dancer, what made her so sought after, why Flo Ziegfeld wanted her so badly, was because you get the double bonus with her of how her face is incredibly beautiful. And the beauty of her face is matched by her talent. And that's pretty rare, where their physical beauty or outward beauty is as exceptional as their talent. Here the prosecutor, after doing his best to make Lulu look like she's a real menace to society, asks the judge for a murder conviction for Lulu. But instead of this, the judge only convicts her of manslaughter and sentences her 4.5 years in a minimum security prison. For sure, the Countess hired these two guys to pull the fire alarm, and I think this is a pretty clever way for her to try and help Lulu escape from the courtroom, even though I don't think this would actually work in real life. Now, the people in the courtroom's sympathies seem to be without exception all with Lulu, because without even a second's hesitation, they help her escape. Now we move into the beginning of Act 6, which will be continued in the next part. And the only other person I can think of right away that comes to mind that would be the modern equivalent of her, though she's not an actress, she's a singer, is Alison Goldfrapp. And Alison Goldfrapp has an incredibly beautiful face, which is again matched by her incredibly beautiful voice and the way she uses it. I think all her attributes together make Alison Goldfrapp the most beautiful woman in the world. In my opinion, I think Louise Brooks would have been the best dancer. For her dedication, you can see in this film, there's a couple scenes where she's shown actually as a professional dancer. I think it's in Act 3, where she has Lulu on stage dancing, and you can see what Louise Brooks' body looked like. She's very small, except for her legs, which are huge and heavily muscled in proportion to the rest of her body. This is what most ballet dancers look like. So that tells me that she practiced her dancing with a lot of long hours and dedication, and usually an indication of a high level of talent, or that their skill level is very high. She has all the skills, and because she's so beautiful, you can't take your eyes off her, so all those skills and talent will be noticed right away, because she doubled, where if you miss one attribute, you'll notice the other one. And maybe I think both her and Alison Goldfrapp are both lucky in the sense that because they're unusually beautiful, their talent was noticed much quicker than it might have been otherwise, and gave them maybe a real head start in life, or opened up a lot more chances for them than they might have gotten otherwise. Now, in this world, the incredible beauty and talent aren't always found together. So for both Louise and Alison, their incredible level of talent makes them 100 times more beautiful than someone with just a pretty face. Now here, the first thing Lulu seems to find is Alva's passport. I think the suggestion here is finding this is what gives Lulu the idea of how she is about to escape her circumstances. In this film, in all the scenes that Louise Brooks is in, it's hard to notice anything else or any of the other actors in the scenes. Now, in this film, we obviously don't get to see how talented or how highly skilled of a dancer Louise Brooks actually was, but I do think that from watching several of her films and seeing how she moves her body, that her ballet training is very, very obvious to me because of the graceful way and beautiful way that she seems to move her body. And immediately after filming one of the initial scenes of the movie in which Louise had to improvise a series of dance steps, Pabst, watching her, recognized right away that she was a professional dancer. One of the things I forgot to mention in a couple other parts of this commentary is that Berlin in the 1920s, where this movie was filmed, was an extremely immoral place at that time. It was probably considered the Sin City of its day. Louise Brooks says in her Lulu in Berlin documentary that the hotel she was staying in when she was filming this movie, she could look out her window and see all the different kinds of prostitutes that were working the streets in Berlin. And Berlin at this time was world famous for having a street of prostitutes that would have one for every single kind of fetish. Now that's customer service. Now, the suggestion here is that when Alva opens the door and looks into the bathroom, he sees Lulu sitting naked in the tub, or even better, standing in the bathroom completely naked, about to get into the tub. Something I wish I could see. Now, remembering Louise Brooks's vivid descriptions of how Pabst used to work with actors really gets my imagination working here. And what I mean by this is that the way Pabst used to like to produce the real reactions out of his actors brings the thought to my mind that he may have thought for briefly about the possibility of actually making Louise Brooks stand naked in the bathroom so that Alva could see her. But Pabst didn't do this because Louise Brooks would have said something about it in her biography. Okay, this is really the part in the film where from here on all the scenes are now shot where there seems to be very little light in the background, in what seems like almost total darkness. And there's probably more than one purpose for this. I think one of the purposes is it's moral darkness, because these characters have all basically, we'll say proverbially, they have all sold their souls to the devil now. So there's no more delaying the consequences. They're now locked into their path, and they're going to have to follow the consequences all the way to the end. Where this is sort of almost like where the movie turns into almost like a TV reality show, where you start to see the beginning of their lives going off the rails, and now the chain of consequences is about to get bigger and bigger and bigger. We all compare this to things we've seen in real life, where one mistake or one sin can often lead to another and another and another, and then we're trapped in an unavoidable and sometimes extremely serious consequence. Like, for example, overdose deaths from addiction, or gamblers, compulsive gamblers, losing their home and losing everything, and where we see in life where most of us in reality are, because we're only really allowed a few mistakes before the consequences become an obstacle that we can't overcome. And the people that seem like they're in control of their life, it's either a carefully crafted illusion or they're master manipulators like a lot of the characters in this film.